snow treasure? 26. It had taken the Germans until Taps to miss the Polish recruit, and then the hunt for him had started. Nearer and nearer to the Kling Pearson came the searching party, but Uncle Victor was calm. If you couldn't find the boat in the daytime, knowing it was here, they're not going to find it at night, he comforted Peter. So let's not worry about their finding us. I'm only hoping that Torp and the other two don't pick this time to come aboard. The Germans trailed up the valley well beyond the two fallen trees, but here the snow was clear of footprints, as the three in the cabin knew. So their trip only served to churn the snow and widen the hunt. For with many footprints on the ground, later search parties would have more territory to cover. Uncle Victor, Rolls, and Peters continued to crowd at the peepholes in the fir branches over the ports. After a time, they saw the Germans turn backwards toward the cliff and the beach. If they search the woods, they can't help coming on the ski trail of our friend here. Uncle Victor meant Jean Lasik. That'll lead them here by the back way, and you can be sure they'll do some close searching. And the next morning, the Snake was quiet as always. The Germans evidently had not yet found the ski trail, and Uncle Victor hoped to be at sea before they did. Just before dawn, Hans Torp and the two other sailors came aboard. They took turns watching for the enemy's approach, but the morning wore away, and they neither saw nor heard anything. The last of the gold would be brought down that afternoon. When it was dark, the Kling could sail. It was going to rain, Peter noted with satisfaction. It wouldn't matter now. The gold had been saved. Lovisa and Michael's teams came to the Snake that day, and Peter went out to join them, for he would be going back to town with them. He longed to remain in the Snake to see Uncle Victor set sail, but for the safety of them all and for the accomplishment of all that they had set out to do, he made no protest when Uncle Victor said he must go back to town. Oh, Peter, we did it, we did it. Lovisa threw her arms around him. Every last brick's out of the cave. It's all down here. We fooled them. We fooled those old goose-steppers. What about the soldier that's missing? Peter wanted to know at once. Was there a search for him in town last night? Was there? Well, you should have been at home. In the middle of the night, they pounded on the door. Per Garson went to open it. They almost knocked him down, pushing past him. They started searching the house. They looked in closets, even with Mother's dresses. They woke up Bunny, and he started hollering, and Mother told them she didn't know what they were looking for, but if they'd tell her, she'd know how to help them. But they just went on poking behind curtains. Do they think we'd hide one of their men? Why are they making this fuss? I guess on its account of his being a Pole and forced against his will to join the army. Was he? How do you know that? How do you know he's a Pole? Nobody in town said he was a Pole. But Peter wouldn't tell, so Lovisa went on. There's a notice on the school door. It said that anyone with information about this missing soldier must report at once to the commandant. And if anyone is found to know something and hasn't told, he'll be punished with death of these Germans. Oof, Peter whistled. Mother's afraid for the Holmes, Lovisa went on. She thinks the missing man might be hiding around their barn, and she's going down this afternoon to warn them to get him out. For she said if they did find anyone there, it'd be pretty hard to make the Nazis understand that Holmes didn't want him. She'll be there when we get back. Peter nodded. Let's get these bricks down and get out of here. Lovisa turned back to her sled, and Peter, watching her, he saw her stiffen in fright. Look, Peter, she whispered. Into the Snake filed a company of German soldiers and an officer. They've come to search, Lovisa said. They did that last night. I guess they've come to look again. Peter, what'll we do? They'll see us with the gold. Right, he snapped into action. The kids will have to hurry. Get your bricks in the snow. Quick, team, he lowered his voice. Here come the Germans. Like squirrels bearing nuts, the children burrowed in the snow. It flew in all directions. Not so deep, Peter directed. Just lay the bricks down and start the snowmen. Faster. They're coming. Mittened hand and unloaded sleds. Now the snow was being patted into hard lumps. The children were well practiced after so many months of winter, and soon was standing a fine army of snowmen. Michael's team was farther up the valley by the farthest of the two fallen trees, and Peter gave the whistle they used at school when Mr. Antlers was coming. Michael whistled back. Then he must understand. He'd know that someone was coming, that danger was near. All right, Lovisa, let them come. Peter dropped on his knees in the snow and began another figure. It was easier to do that than to stand there waiting for the Germans. In all the weeks they'd been coming to the Snake, this would be the first time the Germans had come there at the same time. Lovisa thought something of this too. They had to wait for the very last day, she grumbled. They let us bring every last bit of gold out, and then they come and find it. Shh, Peter cautioned. Don't let them know you think anything is out of the ordinary, and they're coming here. They're only looking for the runaway soldier, you know. It was Lieutenant Sitdown who led the company into the Snake. They came plodding through the snow to the level space between the two trees, and here the ground was dotted with children and snowmen. There's no one here but these youngsters, he told the sergeant. They're no use to ask them if they saw anyone, for they won't answer. I think we might as well go back. The sergeant drew up stiffly. Pardon, Herr Lieutenant, he said. The commandant comes. Chapter 27. Near the cliff, Peter could see the bulky figure of the commandant, the head of the German forces at Ryswick. He was picking his way up the valley. Peter and Lovisa continued playing in the snow. Peter had begun a snowman, and Lovisa was making hers a fancy hat. They wanted to get up and start for home, but they didn't dare move. They felt they would be less noticed if they stayed where they were. The commandant came puffing along, and he seemed to have trouble lifting his feet in the deep snow. In his hand, he carried a light little cane, a swagger stick. He plodded along until he came to the children, and when he got there, he stopped in his tracks. If he'd only go on, Peter growled to himself, but he didn't dare look up to see. His hands were busy with the snow. His head was hot and his mouth dry, and there was a buzzing in his ears. What would happen now? What if the commandant found the bricks buried under the snowmen? Why, there were more than 1,000,000 kroner right here at their feet. We're searching for a German infantryman, the commandant announced to the children. Have any of you seen a man in the woods? Of course there was no answer. He turned aside to whisper a few words to Lieutenant Sit Down. Then he spoke to the children in a loud voice. I said we are looking for a German infantryman. It's very important for you children to tell if you've seen one on this part of the coast. There's a severe penalty attached if anyone has seen him and not reported it. Still, the children said nothing. I've got a good mind to give you children a lesson in manners. His voice was angry. When you're spoken to, it's only right that you should answer. Has no one taught you that? Now then, yes or no. Have you seen a German infantry soldier in the fjord? The children acted as if they had not heard him. Lovisa sat back on her heels to admire her handiwork, but Peter, for all he tried to be cool, felt a terrible thumping in his chest. His cheeks must be red as rowan berries, for if any snowmen were to be knocked down. The commandant strode across the snow and stood above Lovisa. Little girl, tell me, did you or did you not see a German infantryman? He screamed in anger. Answer me. Lovisa only turned her big blue eyes up at him. Not so much as a nod did she give him. Don't you know I can make you talk? Don't you realize we Germans can make anyone do our will? We've only to command to be obeyed. Peter remembered the pact they had made that day they had started the undertaking. They had sworn on the sword they wouldn't give information about what they were doing. Of course, this wasn't the same, but even so, they weren't to talk to the Germans for fear they would say something to make them suspicious. But no need to worry about Lovisa. Pledge or not, she wouldn't talk. The commandant's eyes fell. There was something he didn't like about the Lovisa's snowmen. Bah, you Norwegians! With his stick, he slashed off the snowman's head. It was as if he would do the same to Lovisa's. Then he raised the stick and cut the snowman neatly in two. The upper part rolled beside the head, only the haunches remained. Down you go, he shouted in rage, just the way all people go who stand in the Fuhrer's way, the way Norway goes, and Holland and Belgium and France and England and all the countries that oppose the German will. Lovisa was near to tears, Peter could tell, but she winked them back. Now, little girl, the commandant went on, you see what will happen to all your people if you do not help the good Germans who have come to save you from the hardships your country makes you endure. Hardships. Peter had to bite his tongue to keep from saying, it is you who bring the hardships, you with your talk of the good Germans. So, little girl, let this be a lesson. The high officer was still in a rage. Unless you want yourself and all who belong to go rolling over like that, and that, and that, and that, and he began kicking the stump of Lovisa's snowman. The snow flew out in a shower, and with each kick, Peter winced, for the commandant's foot could only be a few inches from her 2 bricks. In their haste that day, they had not been able to bury them deep, but had to count on the snowmen to hide the gold. The high officer had evidently decided to give Lovisa a thorough lesson, for he lifted his foot for another kick, and like a football player, he stood back to swing at what was left of the snowy figure. In another minute, he'll stub his toe against the bricks, Peter thought. Then he gathered up a handful of snow. He rolled it into a hard ball, and then he stood back and took aim. It landed exactly on the commandant's right ear, as Peter meant it should. Then Peter took to his heels and ran for the woods. And that is the end of 27. So we just finished 26 and 27.